But let's move on to Bayern Munich, because obviously the champions, the treble winners, we know how they obliterated all before them in the Champions League last year, and they've had a really good summer, I would say, at least in terms of incomings. Leroy Sané, Alexander Nubel and Tanguy Nianzou have all arrived. Outgoings, obviously Thiago's a big loss, but they knew that was coming. He didn't want to sign a new contract. They've got a fee for him, although not very much initially. It's staggered over 4 years. And I was listening to the Athletic podcast the other day with Rafa Honigstein, who said that it's as much as 100 million euros, the Thiago deal, spread across 3 or 4 years, with his wages being close to 300 grand a week, I think. So,
wow.
Liverpool have really committed to Thiago, and we're all convinced it's going to work out, but, Bayern perhaps weren't willing to go that far. Javi Martinez looks like he's going to go back to Athletic Bilbao if Bayern agree to cancel the last year of his contract so he can go on a free. And David Alaba is still stalling over a new contract in Bavaria, which, with 10 days of the window to go is not exactly what you want to hear. But I doubt he'll leave. But if all three did leave, that's three players last year who played 106 games between them. So that's a lot of experience they need to cover. And so far, at the moment, it's Serginho Dest who's being linked to them quite heavily, who we're going to talk about in our big match preview, because Barcelona are also in the hunt for him. Fabrizio Romano said on Twitter the other day that he'd agreed personal terms with Bayern Munich, but Barcelona had come in at the sort of 11th hour and offered a pretty attractive proposal, so he's got a big decision on his hands. And then we're also hearing that Mario Götze might be signed on a free contract, and Callum Hudson-Odoi. For me, Götze's a really weird one to be linked with, really. I mean, he was obviously there for 3 years, left in 2016, did all right at Bayern, but left because he didn't really, get enough game time. He didn't really feel like an integral member of the side. Last year at Dortmund, had his issues with the club, had his issues, on the pitch as well. Didn't seem at his best at all. So that would be a weird pickup for me. And then Callum Hudson-Odoi, you can see why he'd want to leave Chelsea for Bayern Munich as it stands at the moment, because obviously he's had a really difficult time with injury there. He's been pretty unfortunate. He played 6 consecutive games in January, then got injured, then came back. The season got cancelled. He got coronavirus. He was falsely accused of a crime that you can read about online. I'm not going to go into detail on that, but it was a false accusation. And then he got into trouble for breaking lockdown at a party as well. And now he's only been given 10 minutes in Chelsea's first 2 league games of the season. Plus they got Hakim Ziyech to come back and Christian Pulisic. So for Hudson-Odoi, he's really at it's not really a crossroads of his career, but it's struggling to get going his career. He still only played 34 Premier League games for Chelsea, but just 11 starts. And in that time, he's looked pretty useful. 1 goal and 6 assists. I struggle to see him playing any more than 20 league games this year. So perhaps he could be available. But I think they should sack off the Mario Götze potential return and instead go for Rodrigo de Paul. He's being linked with Leeds, and that would be a fantastic coup for Leeds. This is a player that we've talked about in Football Daily for years now. Can play in a variety of midfield roles. Last year for Udinese, 34 Serie A games, 7 goals, 6 assists. Really good defensive output as well. Can play as a deeper player, can play as a creator as well. I mean, last year he was averaging 0.5 expected goals and assists per 90, which is, only 0.1 probably less than a really high quality winger, really. Backup as well, we talked about him earlier in the summer, but it's all gone a bit quiet. Lorenzo Pellegrini supposedly had a £30 million release clause. I don't know whether that still stands, but apparently he's keen to stay at Roma, so maybe that would be difficult for Bayern to execute. And then, lots of people have been saying, oh, how will Bayern cope without Thiago? Well, actually, they've got so many options in there already. It's Kimmich, Goretzka, Cuisance, who you'd expect to play more games this year, and obviously Tolisso, who had his injury issues last year. Plus, they've got a whole load of young players as well. But I feel like one signing that could really sort of solidify their midfield for the next few years, who would really excite the fans, is Camavinga. Obviously, still so young, only 17. But he's coming up to 50 games for Rennes now. And last year for Rennes, nearly 6 tackles and interceptions. Are very good on the ball. This year, he's already looked like he's added so much more to his game. I saw some highlights of him playing the other day. And his turning's got so much better. His short passing, when to pass, when to move. He just looks like a pretty complete midfielder. Made his France debut the other day as well and shone. So Camavinga would be a great addition for them long term. And then let's briefly touch on Real Madrid, because they've mainly spent this summer sort of offloading players, which I think could be an error in their fullback areas at least. I think they will come to regret selling Hakimi and Reguilon, but they got rid of Bale, obviously, James Rodriguez, Oscar Rodriguez, Kubo, Brahim Diaz. These players, most of them have gone on loan, of course. Renier's gone on loan as well. And I was watching their game on Sunday against Real Sociedad, which we covered on ERU, and suddenly without Asensio and Hazard, they kind of lack a little bit of cutting edge. And it was really damning that they were struggling to create many chances. They were struggling to... Actually, it wasn't really that they were struggling to create. It was struggling that they were trying to sort of take those chances and create high-quality chances, is what I think I'm trying to say. And still, Luka Jovic didn't come off the bench. He's still being linked with a move away. And supposedly Spurs are considering a move for him as well. So that will be interesting. I mean, guys, it's so difficult because... You're asking for a player to come in who's going to watch 30 games at least from the bench for behind Benzema. So getting a striker in for Real Madrid is going to be really difficult. But do you guys have anyone that could be a potential Real Madrid signing as a striker, or do you think they need to strengthen in any other areas? McCubs, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like backups, I was looking at Real Madrid's squad and like they brought in Odegaard, who steps up that midfield and will help transition that midfield out of their current three in the long term, in terms of creativity and going forward. But they still don't have a backup for Casemiro. Like they need that backup, I think, because if Casemiro gets injured, then that midfield falls apart. I think there's not really. I can't really think. I was looking at the squad earlier. There's not really anyone who could just kind of slot in there, there's not like one of those kind of utility men who could slot in there, unless Federico Valverde.
I was thinking Fede Valverde.
Yeah,
maybe,
I mean perhaps, but I still don't feel. I feel like they need a specialist in there because that midfield has relied on having a player of kind of Casemiro speciality for so long. I think it's a big risk to not have a backup for him, which is obviously why they've been linked with Camavinga so consistently since he made his breakout last year. Like that's, I think, kind of one of the big reasons, isn't it, that he's the kind of seen as the guy who would hold down that midfield for so long. So yeah, I guess he would in some ways be the obvious shout, but yeah, I think CDM they definitely need to look at.
Absolutely. I mean, Henry, just to finish off on Real Madrid, do you think Real Madrid fans and Real Madrid, the sort of organisation, would have seen James Rodriguez instant impact in the Premier League and maybe have some regrets about effectively what we're hearing now, effectively let him go for almost free?
Yeah, I mean, I saw your tweet when you talked about how much you liked Vinicius Junior. I really don't rate him. I think if we consider that Eden Hazard is probably going to be out of shape for the next few weeks, he's not ready to come back. If
Definitely
we consider
doesn't look in shape,
no, Asensio has his moments, and Isco, you're just never quite sure. I think they're going to really struggle if Benzema is the only point of the goals coming in that team. I do think they'll regret selling someone like James. Well, I mean, I don't think they'll regret it because I think he had to leave. Do you know what I mean? His time was up there. He was quite clearly not happy there, and I think he's been given the lease of life by Ancelotti. But yeah, I think Vinicius is not like... He's had so many chances now, and his return, and I appreciate he does some nice dribbles and he looks good and flashy moments, but Rodrigo, in my opinion, is better than him. And I just think they're going to really struggle because if you looked at their bench, there wasn't really any options coming off the bench that weekend to replace him. Exactly, who you said in the podcast with Pato, you just didn't really...
I didn't know who he was. I've done a bit of digging in him now. He was actually at Tranmere Rovers a few years ago.
Oh. Well, that's great. What a story
rags to riches.
Yeah, an amazing story. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think Vinicius needs to step up, at least in the final third.